It was a bright, warm afternoon, the kind of day that fills your heart with calm. The sun kissed my skin as I lay beside our pool, my legs tucked comfortably beneath me, savoring the moment. My husband was in the water, splashing around, his laughter ringing through the air. And me, I was finally doing what I had always dreamed of. I was enjoying my backyard, my pool, my freedom, like any other person would. But little did I know, that serene afternoon would soon spiral into a battle I wasn't prepared for. For years, my husband and I had searched for the perfect house. I wanted something that would give me the freedom I had never had before, something that felt like a place of solace. I've been in a wheelchair since my teens after a car accident, so finding a home without stairs, with open spaces and a backyard, well, that felt like a dream. But the ultimate dream? A pool. I had always imagined how it would feel, to simply glide into the water, to feel the cool embrace of it without needing help every single time. When we found this house, a single-story ranch style with a backyard that seemed made for me, it felt like the universe had finally listened. The pool was fenced in, offering privacy. I could already picture myself there, basking in the sun, feeling the breeze through my hair. But I couldn't have known that the very thing that gave me joy would also spark a conflict that threatened to take it all away. Soon after moving in, we met the HOA president, Vanessa. At first, I thought nothing of her. She came to welcome us, as HOA presidents tend to do. But there was something in the way she looked at me. It wasn't just a passing glance. It was a subtle hesitation, a discomfort. Perhaps she wasn't sure how to react to seeing me in a wheelchair, but there was something about it that stuck with me. It wasn't a rude look, not exactly, but it was a look that suggested I wasn't quite what she expected in the neighborhood. Things seemed to settle after that, or so I thought. But gradually, I began to notice a pattern. Whenever there was an issue with the neighborhood or our home, Vanessa would direct all communication to my husband. Even though I was the one home most of the time, it was always him she would talk to. I tried not to read too much into it, but it became obvious over time. She just wasn't comfortable dealing with me, with my questions, my needs. And that subtle discomfort? It was turning into something more. One of the first hurdles came when I wanted to use our pool more freely. Getting in and out of a traditional pool was a challenge, even with the ramp that had been installed. I knew I needed some modifications to make it more accessible. A set of steps with handles, simple and removable. Nothing permanent, just something that would help me get in and out on my own. My husband and I submitted a request to the HOA to make these adjustments. Surely it would be an easy fix. Surely they'd understand. But as weeks passed with no response, I began to wonder if something wasn't right. Every email, every call to Vanessa went unanswered, or worse, met with vague excuses. When we finally got a response, it wasn't what I had hoped for. Vanessa dismissed it as a cosmetic change, one that didn't require immediate attention. I was floored. This wasn't a cosmetic issue. This was about my ability to enjoy my own pool. This was about accessibility. By the time we installed the steps on our own, simple, removable steps that could be taken out at any time, I thought we were doing the right thing. We weren't trying to disrupt the neighborhood. We just wanted to make my life a little easier. But that's when Vanessa showed up, uninvited and furious. "You can't just install things without approval," she yelled. She was practically shaking with anger. I explained calmly that these steps weren't permanent. They didn't alter the pool in any significant way. They could be removed at a moment's notice. But she wasn't listening. No matter how much we tried to reason with her, she refused to budge. And then the ultimate twist, she called the police. I couldn't believe it. My own backyard, my own pool, and I was being treated like a criminal. As she dialed 911, my heart raced, my mind spinning. Was this really happening? Was I really being dragged into something so ridiculous? The police arrived quickly, the sirens fading into the distance as they pulled up to our home. I was shaking, my anxiety overwhelming me. I wanted to stand up for myself, to say how absurd this was, but before I could, my husband calmly stepped in, speaking to the officer. We're in our own backyard. She's wearing a swimsuit. There's nothing wrong here, he explained. I could feel my heart beating faster as I braced myself for the worst. But what happened next took me by surprise. The officer turned to Vanessa, his voice firm but calm. Ma'am, there's no crime here. If this is your personal opinion, I suggest you keep it to yourself, he said, pointing out that this was a private matter, not something the police could handle. Then, with a final word of reassurance, he nodded at my husband and me, signaling us to continue enjoying our day. For a brief moment, I thought it was over. But, of course, it wasn't. A few weeks later, we received a letter from the HOA. It was a formal notice of violation for the pool steps. Steps that were removable and caused no harm. Vanessa had found a new way to attack. She had convinced the HOA board that these steps violated some obscure rule about modifications to the pool area. I couldn't believe it. This was happening again. My frustration boiled over. But this time, we decided to fight back. We consulted with a lawyer, and after reviewing the case, it became clear we had every right to keep the steps in place. There was no legal precedence for the HOA's demands. We were in the clear. Our lawyer sent a letter to the HOA, informing them that if they continued this harassment, we'd take them to court. Vanessa didn't back down. She rallied the HOA board against us, but the more she pushed, the more we stood our ground. With the backing of our lawyer, we were prepared for whatever came next. And then, just as we thought things couldn't get worse, we received yet another notice, this time from the city council. Vanessa had filed a complaint about the pool steps, claiming they violated city zoning laws. I couldn't believe the lengths she was going to in order to punish me. But again, we weren't going to back down. Our lawyer assured us that Vanessa's actions were baseless, that we had the law on our side. The city council hearing was set, and we walked in prepared. We presented our case. And when it was Vanessa's turn, she could hardly form a coherent argument. Her personal vendetta was clear for everyone to see. The council deliberated, and the decision was unanimous. The pool steps did not violate any codes, and the city supported modifications that improved accessibility. We had won. After the hearing, the atmosphere in our neighborhood changed. People who had avoided us began to approach. Some even apologized. And Vanessa, she was forced to step down as HOA president. The very thing she had used to intimidate and control others had crumbled beneath the weight of truth. We were free to enjoy our pool, free to live in our home without fear of being harassed. And I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time, peace. This whole ordeal wasn't just about the pool steps. It was about reclaiming my right to live freely, to be myself without fear of judgment. It was about standing up for what was right, even when it felt like the odds were stacked against me. And as for Vanessa, she learned that you can't control people simply because they don't fit into your narrow view of the world. After the legal victory, our lives slowly began to return to normal. But there was something that lingered in the back of my mind, a feeling that I couldn't quite shake. I had fought for my right to access my pool, but what about others? What about those in my community who didn't have the same resources or knowledge to fight back? What about the countless individuals with disabilities who might face the same discrimination or barriers? I knew that this battle, although deeply personal, was about something bigger. I couldn't help but think that if more people like me spoke out, if more of us stood up for our rights, we could make real, lasting change. So, I began to reach out to others in the community. There had to be a way to make the neighborhood more inclusive, to create spaces that catered to everyone, regardless of their abilities. It started with small conversations. A few of the neighbors who had apologized after the city council ruling became my allies. Together, we put together a community meeting, an open discussion about accessibility and how we could better serve individuals with disabilities in the neighborhood. To my surprise, it wasn't just about my pool anymore. People had stories of their own, of how they had faced similar issues in their lives, whether with their homes and public spaces or even within their families. The meeting became a catalyst for change. We began to work on proposals for making our HOA more inclusive, Things like better accessibility to shared spaces, wider walkways, and even social events that embraced all levels of mobility. It was a turning point, not just for me, but for everyone in the neighborhood. It wasn't just about fixing a single issue anymore. It was about creating a community that welcomed everyone, no matter their age, ability, or background. While all of this was unfolding, I couldn't help but reflect on my own journey. The truth was, I had carried a lot of resentment and anger for years. Years of feeling like I was treated differently because of my disability. Years of feeling like I wasn't enough for the world around me. I'd spent so much time trying to prove that I could do everything on my own, that I could fight battles like anyone else. But now I realized something profound. It wasn't about proving anything. It was about claiming my space, my rights, and my life. And I didn't have to fight alone. One evening, as I sat on the patio with my husband, watching the sunset paint the sky in hues of pink and orange, I finally spoke up. I told him how much this battle had meant to me, not just because of the pool, but because of what it represented. It was about me finally stepping into the world on my own terms, about no longer hiding in the shadows. "You've always been enough," he said, taking my hand. "You've always had the right to live the way you want to. And you've made the world a better place by standing up for it." Those words hit me harder than I expected. All this time, I had thought I was just fighting for myself. But in reality, I had fought for everyone like me, for anyone who had ever felt overlooked or invisible. With the new changes taking shape in the neighborhood, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. But there was more work to be done. The more we talked about accessibility, the more I realized how many people were unaware of the everyday challenges that those with disabilities faced. Whether it was an elderly neighbor with a walker or a young family with a child in a stroller, the reality was that accessibility wasn't just a special need, it was a human need. Everyone, regardless of their abilities or stage in life, deserved to feel included. That's when I decided to take the next step, spreading the message of inclusivity beyond my neighborhood. I started writing about my journey, sharing it with local newspapers and online communities. I wanted others to understand that accessibility was more than just ramps and wide doorways. It was about respect, dignity, and the freedom to live as you choose, without limitations. Soon, my story began to resonate with others. People who had faced similar struggles reached out to me, sharing their own experiences and asking for advice. Some were dealing with aging parents who were no longer able to navigate their homes. Others were struggling to get support for their own accessibility needs. The more I spoke about these issues, the more I realized that this fight wasn't just mine. It was a fight for anyone who had ever felt marginalized, anyone who had ever been told they weren't good enough because of their circumstances. And then something incredible happened. A local politician contacted me, inspired by my story and the work I had done in my community. They wanted to partner with me on a campaign to improve accessibility laws and raise awareness about disability rights. It was a dream come true, a chance to take everything I had learned and help others on a larger scale. Together, we worked on a bill that would encourage cities to adopt better accessibility standards, not just for people with disabilities, but for everyone, regardless of their mobility. The bill passed, and I found myself speaking at press conferences, sharing my story on national platforms. People were listening and they were moved. It was a reminder that change starts with one voice, one person willing to stand up and say, "This isn't right, and I'm going to do something about it." Years have passed since that battle over the pool steps. My husband and I still enjoy our backyard, our pool, and the life we've built together. But more than that, we've seen our neighborhood transform. It's a place where everyone has a voice, a place where differences are celebrated, and where accessibility isn't just a privilege, it's a right. Looking back, I realize how far we've come. From that small, almost trivial fight over pool steps, we've created a ripple effect that has touched so many lives. And I know that as long as I continue to speak out, as long as I continue to share my story and my truth, that ripple will only continue to grow. We all have the power to make a difference, to challenge the systems that try to limit us, and to live our lives on our own terms. It's never easy, but the fight for freedom, for equality, and for respect is always worth it. And no matter what happens, we must always remember, our voices matter, our stories matter, and we are enough just as we are.